Hello, Year 5. You ready for the next chapter of our book? You're very much looking forward to this. The next chapter is called, where's Tiffany? Chapter 6, The Shepherdess. You're dead, said Tiffany. She looked around where Feagles were picking themselves up and grumbling, but no one was going wally wally wally. And Rob Anybody wasn't making any sense at all. Well, if you think you're dead, then what are they? She went on, pointing to a couple of small bodies. Oh, they've gone back to the land of the living, said Rob Anybody cheerfully. It's nae as good as this one, but they'll bide fine and come back before too long. No sense in grieving. The Aikings were not very religious, but Tiffany thought she knew how things ought to go, and they started out with the idea that you were alive and not dead yet. But you are alive, she said. Ach, no, mistress, said Rob, helping another pixie to his feet. We was alive, and we was good boys back in the land of the living, and so when we died, we was born into this place. You mean you think that you sort of died somewhere else and then came here? Said Tiffany. You mean like this is heaven? Aye, just as advertised, said Rob Anybody. Lovely sunshine, good hunting, nice pretty flowers, and wee birdies going cheep. Aye, and then there's the fighting, said another one. And they all joined in. And the stealing, and the drinking, and the fighting, and the kebabs, said Daft Willie. But there's bad things here, said Tiffany. There's monsters. Aye, said Rob Anybody, beaming happily. Grand, isn't it? Everything all laid on, even things to fight. But we live here, said Tiffany. Ah, well, maybe all you humans was good in the last world too, said Rob Anybody generously. I'll just round up the lads, mistress. Tiffany reached into her apron and pulled out the toad as Rob walked away. Oh, we survived, it said. Amazing. There are very definite grounds for an action against the owner of those dogs, by the way. What? Said Tiffany, frowning. What are you talking about? I I don't know, said the toad. The thought just popped into my head. Perhaps I knew something about dogs when I was a human. Listen, the Feagles, they think they're in heaven. They think they died and came here. And, said the toad, well, that can't be right. You're supposed to be alive here, and then die, and then end up in heaven somewhere else. Well, that's just saying the same thing in a different way, isn't it? Anyways, lots of warrior tribes think that when they die they'll go to a heavenly land somewhere, said the toad. You know, where they can drink and fight and feast forever. So, maybe this is theirs. But this is a real place. So, it's what they believe. Besides, they're only small. Maybe the universe is a bit crowded, and they have to put heavens anywhere there's room. I'm a toad, so you'll appreciate that I'm having to guess a lot here. Maybe they're just wrong. Maybe you're just wrong. Maybe I'm just wrong. A small foot kicked Tiffany in the book. We'd best be moving on, mistress, said Rob Anybody. He had a dead Feagle over his shoulder. Quite a few of the others were carrying bodies too. Are you going to bury them? Said Tiffany. Aye, they didn't need those old bodies now, and it's no tidy leaving them lying about, said Rob Anybody. Besides, if the big jobs find little wee skulls and bones around, they'll start to wonder, and we don't want anybody poking about. Saving your presence, mistress, he added. No, that's very practical thinking, said Tiffany, giving up. The Feagle pointed to a distant mound with a thicket of thorn trees growing on it. A lot of mounds had thickets on them. The trees took advantage of the deeper soil. It was said to be unlucky to cut them down. It's nae very far noo, he said. You live in one of those mounds? Tiffany asked. I thought they were, the graves of ancient chieftains. Ah, guy, there's some old dead kingy in the chamber next door, but he's nae trouble, said Rob. Dinna fret, there's nae skeletons or any such in our bit. It's quite roomy, and we've done it up a treat. Tiffany looked up at the endless blue sky over the endless green downland. It was all so peaceful again. a world away from headless men and big savage dogs. What if I hadn't taken Wentworth to the river? She thought. What would I be doing now? Getting on with the cheese, I suppose. I never knew about all this. I never knew I lived in a heaven. Even if it's only heaven to a clan of little blue men. I didn't know about people who flew on buzzards. I never killed monsters before. Where do they come from? She said. What's the name of the place monsters come from? Ack, you probably ken the place well, said Rob Anybody, as they drew nearer the mound. Tiffany thought she could smell smoke in the air. Do I? She said. Aye, but it's no a name I'll say in open air. It's a name to be whispered in a safe place. I'll not say it under the sky. It was too big to be a rabbit hole, and badgers didn't live up here, but the entrance to the mound was tucked amongst the thorn roots, and no one would have thought it was anything but the home of some kind of animal. Tiffany was slim, but even so she had to take off her apron and crawl on her stomach under the thorns to reach it, and it still needed several feagles to push her through. At least it didn't smell bad. Once you were through the hole, it opened up a lot. Really, the entrance was just a disguise. Underneath, the space was the size of quite a large room, open in the centre, but with feagle-sized galleries around the walls from floor to ceiling. They were crowded with pixies of all sizes, washing clothes, arguing, sewing, here and there, fighting, and doing everything as loudly as possible. Some had hair and beards tinged with white. Much younger ones, only a few inches tall, were running around with no clothes on and yelling at one another at the top of their little voices. After a couple of years of helping to bring up Wentworth, Tiffany knew what that was all about. There were no girls, though, no wee free women. No, there was one. The squabbling, bustling crowds parted to let her through. She came up to Tiffany's ankle. She was prettier than the male feagles, although the world was full of things prettier than, say, Daft Willie. But, like them, she had red hair and an expression of determination. She curtsied, then said, Are ye the big job hag, mistress? Tiffany looked around. She was the only person in the cavern who was over 7 inches tall. Yes, she said. More or less, yes. I am Fionn. The Kilda says to tell you the wee boy will come to nae harm yet. She's found him, said Tiffany quickly. Where is he? Nay, but the Kilda knows the way of the Queen. She didn't want you to fash yourself on that score. But she stole him. Aye, 'tis complicated. Rest a wee while. The Kilda will see you presently. She is not strong now. Fionn turned round with a swirl of skirts, strode back across the chalk floor as if she was queen herself, and disappeared behind a large round stone that leaned against the far wall. Tiffany, without looking down, carefully lifted the toad out of her pocket and held it close to her lips. Am I fashing myself? She whispered. No, not really, said the toad. You would tell me if I was, wouldn't you? Said her Tiffany urgently. It'd be terrible if everyone could see I was fashing and I didn't know it. You haven't a clue what fashing means, have you? Said the toad. No, not exactly, no. She just doesn't want you to get upset, that's all. Yes, I thought it was probably something like that, lied Tiffany. Can you sit on my shoulder? I think I might need some help here. The ranks of the Knack McFeagle were watching her with interest, but at the moment it appeared that she had nothing to do but hurry up and wait. She sat down carefully, drumming her fingers on her knees. What do you think of the wee place then, eh? Said a voice from below. It's great, yeah? She looked down. Rob Anybody Feagle was a few of the pixies she'd already met were lurking there, watching her nervously. Very cosy, said Tiffany, because that was better than saying how sooty, how delightfully noisy. She added, Do you cook for all of you on that little fire? The big space in the centre held a small fire under a hole in the roof which let the smoke get lost in the bushes above and in return brought a little extra light. Aye, mistress, said Rob Anybody. The small stuff, bunnies and that, added Daft Willie. The big stuff we roast in the chop. Sorry, what was that? Said Tiffany. What? said Rob Anybody, innocently, his hand firmly over the mouth of the struggling Willie. What was Willie saying about roasting big stuff? Tiffany demanded. You roast big stuff in the chalk pit. Is this the kind of big stuff that goes bah? Because that's the only big stuff you'll find in these hills. She kneeled down on the grimy floor and brought her face to within an inch of Rob Anybody's face, which was grinning madly and sweating. Is it? Ach, in a manner of speaking. It is? 'Tis not thine, mistress, shrieked Rob Anybody. We ne'er took an aching sheep without the leave of Granny. Granny Aching let you have sheep? Aye, she did. She did that. As payment. Payment for what? No aching sheep ever got caught by wolves, Rob Anybody gabbled. No foxes took an aching lamb, right? Nor no lamb ever had its eyes pecked out by corbies, not with Hamish up in the sky. Tiffany looked sideways at the toad. Crows, said the toad. They sometimes peck out the eyes of... Yes, I know what they do, said Tiffany. She calmed down a little. Oh, I see. You kept away the crows and the wolves and the foxes for Granny, yes? Aye, mistress. No, just kept them away neither, said Rob Anybody triumphantly. There's good eating on a wolf. Aye, they kebabs up a tree, but they're no as good as a sheep. That no... Willie managed before a hand was clasped over his mouth again. From a hag you only take what you's given, said Rob Anybody, holding his struggling brother firmly. Since she's gone though, well, we take the odd old ewe that would have died anyway, but ne'er one with the aching mark, on my honour. On your honour as a drunken rowdy thief, said Tiffany. Rob Anybody beamed. Aye, he said, and I got a lot of good reputation to protect there. That's the truth of it, mistress. We keep an eyes on the sheeps of the hills in memory of Granny Aiken, and in return we take what is hardly worth a thing. And the baccy too, of course. And then once again Daft Willie was struggling to breathe. Tiffany took a deep breath, not a wise move in a fecal colony. Rob Anybody's nervous grin made him look like a pumpkin man faced with a big spoon. You take the tobacco, hissed Tiffany. The tobacco, the shepherd's leave, for my grandmother. I forgot about that, said Rob Anybody, but we always wait a few days in case she comes to collect it herself. You can never tell wi' a hag after all. And we do mind the sheeps, mistress, and she wouldn't grudge us, mistress. Many a night she'd share a pipe with a kilda outside her house on the wheelies. She'd not be the one to let good baccy get all rainy. Please, mistress. Tiffany felt intensely angry, and what made it worse was that she was angry with herself. When we find lost lambs and such like, we drives them here. For when the shepherds come looking, Rob Anybody added anxiously. What did I think happened? Tiffany thought. Did I think she'd come back for a packet of Jolly Sailor? Did I think she was still somehow walking the hills looking after the sheep? Did I think she was here watching the lost lambs? Yes, I want that to be true. I don't want to think she's just gone. Someone like Granny Aiken can't just not be there anymore. And I want her back so much because she didn't know how to talk to me and I was too scared to talk to her, and so we never talked and we turned silence into something to share. I know nothing about her, just some books and some stories she tried to tell me and things I didn't understand. I remember big red soft hands and that smell. I never knew who she really was. I mean, she must have been 9 too once. She was Sarah Grizzle. She got married and had children, 2 of them in the shepherding hut. She must have done all sorts of things I don't know about. And into Tiffany's mind, as it always did sooner or later, came the figure of the blue and white China shepherdess swirling in red mists of shame. That picture there is the blue and white China shepherdess, but obviously it's a black and white picture. It's the same picture. Look over the book. That's like a little ornament that they have in the house of the shepherdess. Tiffany's father took her to the fair at the town of Yelp one day not long before her 7th birthday, when the farm had some rams to sell. That was a 10-mile journey, the furthest she'd ever been. It was off the chalk. Everything looked different. There were far more fenced fields and lots of cows, and the buildings had tiled roofs instead of thatch. She considered that this was foreign travel. Granny Aching had never been there, said her father on the way. She hated leaving the chalk, he said. She said it made her dizzy. It was a great day. Tiffany was sick on candy floss and had her fortune told by a little old lady who said that many, many men would want to marry her and won the shepherdess, which was made of china, painted in white and blue. She was the star prize on the hoopla stall, but Tiffany's father had said that it was all cheating, because the base was so wide not one of throwing a million could ever drop the hoop right over it. She'd thrown the ring any old how, and it had been the one in a million. The stall holder hadn't been very happy about it landing over the shepherdess rather than the gimcrack rubbish in the rest of the stall. He handed it over when her father spoke sharply to him, though, and he'd hugged it all the way home to the cart, while the stars came out. Next morning, she proudly presented it to Granny Aching. The old woman had taken it very carefully in her wrinkled hands and stared at it for some time. Tiffany was sure, now, that it had been a cruel thing to do. Granny Aching had probably never heard of shepherdesses. People who cared for sheep in the chalk were all called shepherds, and that was all there was to it. And this beautiful creature was as much unlike Granny Aching as anything could be. China Shepherdess had an old-fashioned long dress with bulgy bits at the side that made it look as though she had saddlebags in her knickers. There was blue ribbons all over the dress and all over the rather showy straw bonnet, and on the shepherd's crook, which was a lot more curly than any crook Tiffany had ever seen. There were even blue bows on the dainty foot poking out from the frilly hem of her dress. This wasn't a shepherdess who'd ever worn any big old boots stuffed with wool and tramped the hills in the howling wind with the sleet being driven along like nails. She'd never tried, in that dress, to pull out a ram who'd got his horns tangled in a thorn patch. This wasn't the shepherdess who'd kept up with the champion shearer for 7 hours, sheep for sheep, until the air was hazy with grease and wool and blue with cussing, and the champion gave up because he couldn't cuss sheep as well as Granny Aching. No self-respecting sheepdog would ever come by or walk up for a simpering girl with saddlebags in her pants. It was a lovely thing, but it was a joke of a shepherdess, made by someone who'd probably never seen a sheep up close. What had Granny Aching thought about it? Tiffany couldn't guess. She'd seemed happy, because it's the job of grandmothers to be happy when grandchildren give them things. She'd put it up on her shelf and then taken Tiffany on her knee and called her "my little jigget" in a nervous sort of way, which she did when she was trying to be grandmotherly. Sometimes, in rare times, Granny was down at the farm. Tiffany could see her take down the statue and stare at it, but if she saw Tiffany watching, she'd put it back quickly and pretend she'd meant to pick up the sheep book. Perhaps, Tiffany thought wretchedly, the old lady had seen it as a sort of insult. Perhaps she thought she was being told that this was what a shepherdess should look like. She shouldn't be an old lady in muddy dress and big boots, with an old sack around her shoulders to keep the rain off. A shepherdess should sparkle like a starry night. Tiffany hadn't meant to. She'd never meant to, but perhaps she had been telling Granny that she wasn't right. And then, a few months after that, Granny had died, and in the years since then everything had gone wrong. Wentworth had been born, and then the Baron's son had vanished, and then there had been the bad winter when Mrs. Snapperley died in the snow. Tiffany kept worrying about the statue. She couldn't talk about it. Everyone else was busy or not interested. Everyone was edgy. They'd have said that worrying about a silly statue was, well, silly. Several times she nearly smashed the shepherdess, but she didn't because people would notice. She wouldn't have given something as wrong as that to Granny Aching now, of course. She'd grown up. She remembered that the old lady would smile oddly sometimes when she looked at the statue. If only she'd said something. But Granny liked silence. And now it turned out she'd made friends with a lot of little blue men who walked the hills looking after the sheep because they liked her too. Tiffany blinked. It made a kind of sense. In memory of Granny Aching, the men left the tobacco, and in memory of Granny Aching, the Knock McFeagle minded the sheep. It all worked, even if it wasn't magic, but it took Granny away. Daft Willie, she said, staring hard at the struggling pixie and trying not to cry. Mm-hmm. Is it true that Rob anybody told me? Mm-hmm. Daft Willie's eyebrows went up and down furiously. Mr. Feagle, can you please take your hand away from his mouth? Said Tiffany. Daft Willie was released. Rob anybody had looked worried, but Daft Willie was terrified. He dragged his bonnet off and stood holding it in his hands as if it was some kind of shield. Is all that true, Daft Willie? Said Tiffany. Oh, Wally. Just a simple yes or a simple aye or nay, please. Aye it is, blurted out Daft Willie. Oh, Wally. Yes, thank you, said Tiffany, sniffing and trying to blink tears away. All right, I understand. The Feagles eyed her cautiously. You're nae gonna get nasty about it, said Rob anybody. No, it all works. She heard it echo around the cavern, the sound of hundreds of little men sighing with relief. She didn't turn me into a prismere, said Daft Willie, grinning happily at the rest of the pixies. Hey lads, I talked with a hag and she didn't even look at me crosswise. She smiled at me. He beamed at Tiffany and went on. And do you ken, mistress, that if you hold the baccy label upside down, then part of the sailor's bonnet and his ear become a lady when they... Ah, there I goes again, accidentally nearly throttling you, said Rob anybody with his hand clamped over Willie's mouth. Tiffany opened her mouth, but stopped when her ears tickled strangely. In the roof of the cave, several bats woke up and hastily flew out of the smoke hole. Some of the Feagles were busy on the far side of the chamber. What Tiffany had thought was a strange round stone was being rolled aside, revealing a large hole. Now her ears squelched and felt as though all the wax was running out. The Feagles were forming up in 2 rows, leading to the hole. Tiffany prodded the toad. Do I want to know what a prismere is? She whispered. It's an ant, said the toad. Oh, I'm slightly surprised. And this sort of high-pitched noise? I'm a toad. We're not good at ears, but it's probably him over there. There was a Feagle walking out of the hole. From which came, now that Tiffany's eyes had become accustomed to the gloom, a faint golden light. The newcomer's hair was white instead of red, and while he was tall for a pixie, he was as skinny as a twig. He was holding some sort of fat skin bag bristling with pipes. Now, there's a sight I don't reckon many humans have seen and lived, said the toad. He's playing the mouse pipes. They make my ears tingle. Tiffany tried to ignore the 2 little ears still on the bag of pipes. High-pitched, see, said the toad. Of course, the pixies hear sounds differently than humans do. He's probably their battle poet too. You mean he makes up heroic songs about famous battles? No, he recites poems that frighten the enemy. Remember how important words are to the Knack McFeagle? Well, when a trained Gonagle starts to recite, the enemy's ears explode, and it looks as though they're ready for you. In fact, Rob anybody was tapping politely on Tiffany's toe cap. The Kelda will see you now, mistress, he said. The piper had stopped playing and was standing respectfully beside the hole. Tiffany felt hundreds of bright little eyes watching her. Special sleep liniment, whispered the toad. Pardon? Take it with us, the toad said insistently. It'd be a good gift. The pixies watched her carefully as she lay down and again crawled through the hole behind the stone, the toad hanging on tightly. As she got closer, she realized that what she thought was a stone was an old round shield, a green, blue, and corroded with age. The hole that it had covered was indeed wide enough for her to go through, but she had to leave her legs outside because it was impossible to get all of her into the room beyond. One reason was the bed, small though it was, which held the Kelda. The other reason was that what the room was mostly full of, piled up around the walls and spilling across the floor, was gold. And that's the end of that chapter. So now she's going to meet the Kelda, who seems to be one of only 2 female Knack McFeagle. We'll need to come back next time to find out. Hope you're still enjoying the story, guys. Staying safe. Take care, and I will see you next time. Bye.